I used to believe the scariest things in life were the ones we could see. The monsters in the dark, the shadows in the corner, the figures at the edge of our vision. I was wrong. What truly terrifies me now is what has no end, what stretches forever, what you can never escape. I have been trapped on this staircase for days now, or weeks, or maybe longer. I don't know anymore. The concept of time has unraveled, slipping through my fingers like sand. I can feel my mind breaking. But this is where it started, where I made my first mistake. It began with a message, a cryptic email from an unknown sender, arriving in my inbox at 3:33 a.m. Have you ever heard of the staircase beneath St. Holloway's Church? It was sealed off for a reason. Don't go looking for it. But if you do, never go past the 13th step. At first, I thought it was a joke. I was a freelance journalist, always chasing urban legends, eerie folklore, and real-life horror stories. I ran a small blog called Forgotten Places, where I wrote about abandoned hospitals, ghost towns, and secret tunnels hidden beneath cities. This sounded like a lead. I researched St. Holloway's Church, but found barely anything. A few references in old newspapers. A fire that gutted it in 1896. And then nothing, like it had been erased. But I found the location, and against every instinct in my body, I went looking. That was my second mistake. St. Holloway's Church was a ruin, overgrown with ivy, its stone walls crumbling under years of decay. The front doors were gone, leaving only an empty doorway that gaped like a mouth. Inside, the air was heavy with dust. The pews were broken. The altar was charred black from the fire. But I wasn't here for any of that. I was looking for the staircase. It took me an hour, searching through the debris before I found it. A trapdoor hidden beneath rotting floorboards, covered in thick dust, as if it hadn't been disturbed in decades. My hands trembled as I pulled it open. A deep, suffocating darkness yawned beneath me. The staircase. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It wasn't dust, or mildew, or even the scent of old wood. It was wrong, like something rotting in the dark. I turned on my flashlight and aimed it downward. The beam barely cut through the shadows, but I could see the first few steps. Stone, cracked, ancient, and leading downward. I hesitated. I should have walked away, but my curiosity was louder than my fear. I took the first step, then another. The air grew colder with each step. The silence was absolute, so quiet I could hear the pounding of my own heart. At step 10, my breath fogged in the air. At step 13, my flashlight flickered. I froze. That email. Never go past the 13th step. I stood there, gripping the railing, my body screaming for me to turn back. Then the door above me slammed shut, and the light went out. I couldn't see. The darkness swallowed me whole. I scrambled for my flashlight, shaking it, slapping it against my palm. It flickered weakly, casting a dim glow. And in that feeble light, I saw movement below me. Something was there, a shadow just beyond my reach. I held my breath, and then it whispered, a voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. Keep going. My stomach twisted. I turned, bolting back up the steps, reaching for the trapdoor, but when I looked up, there was no door. Only more stairs. Endless stairs, stretching upward and downward. No way out. I was trapped. Panic set in. I ran up, as fast as I could, step after step after step. But the staircase never ended. I screamed. My voice echoed into the void, swallowed by the dark. I turned and ran downward instead. But it was the same. No exit, just stone steps, twisting forever. And then I heard it again. A whisper, closer this time. Keep going. Something moved in the darkness below me. And then I saw them. The hands. Pale, skeletal fingers reaching out from the shadows, grasping at the edges of the steps, climbing toward me. I turned and ran, and ran, and ran. But the staircase never ended, only twisted deeper into the dark. And somewhere below, the whispers grew louder, calling my name, waiting for me. I should be dead. I should have collapsed from exhaustion by now. But the staircase will not let me rest. There is no time here, no hunger, no thirst, no fatigue, only the endless, spiraling descent. And the whispers, they have grown louder. They know my name. And worse, they're getting closer. I try to keep track at first. The number of steps. Each one felt the same underfoot, cold, cracked stone, damp with some unseen moisture. The air had a strange weight to it, thick and cloying, pressing against my lungs. I started counting. 1 step, 2, 13, 20, 30. By the time I reached what should have been the 100th step, I stopped. Because something was wrong. The staircase was changing. At first, the details were small. The stone felt warmer under my fingertips. The cracks in the steps were different than before. Then, I noticed something that made my stomach lurch. There were footprints. Not mine. The dust should have been undisturbed. But these prints were fresh, like someone had just walked ahead of me. Bare footprints. Small, like those of a child. I stared at them, my pulse thudding in my ears. And then I heard it. A soft, distant giggle. Not a joyful sound. A sound like something mimicking a child's laughter. I turned and ran. I ran up this time. Or at least, I thought I was going up. I pumped my legs, pushing myself, my breaths coming in sharp, panicked gasps. But the stairs, they never changed. I didn't see the trapdoor. I didn't see an end. Only more stone spiraling into darkness. Then, my flashlight flickered again. I slowed, heart hammering. It sputtered and then died. Complete blackness swallowed me. And in that darkness, I felt it. Something cold brushed against my ankle. Fingers, grasping. I screamed, kicking wildly, stumbling against the wall. The touch was gone, but I knew I was not alone. And the whispers, they were right behind me. I fumbled desperately with my flashlight, slapping it against my palm. A weak flicker of light burst forth. The staircase around me was empty. But my heartbeat wouldn't slow. I knew what I felt. Something had touched me. I turned to look back down the steps, and my stomach twisted. The footprints were gone. No trace of them. Like they had never been there at all. And then something spoke. Not a whisper this time. A voice. My own voice. It echoed from below me. Hello. I clamped my hands over my mouth, heart hammering. I had not spoken, but something down there had, mimicking me, perfectly. And then, from even further below, a chorus of voices repeated it back. Hello. 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 My own voice, echoing from things that were not me. And they were coming closer. I ran again. There was no logic to it. The staircase made no sense. It went up forever. It went down forever. And I was trapped. But I couldn't stay still. Not when those voices were getting louder. Not when I could hear the soft tap, tap, tap of bare feet on stone, climbing toward me. Then I saw light. Not from my flashlight. Something ahead of me. A faint glow, just around the bend of the spiral. I stopped, panting, staring at it. A way out? I had no choice. I moved toward it carefully, every muscle in my body coiled with tension. As I rounded the curve, I saw her. A little girl stood on the steps, illuminated by the eerie glow. Her dress was white, tattered and stained. Her hair hung in tangled clumps over her face. And her arms were too long. She tilted her head, peering at me from behind strands of blackened hair. Then she lifted her hand and pointed behind me. I didn't want to turn. I didn't want to see, but I felt it. A presence. Something towering. Something waiting. Right behind me. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were breathing, close enough to touch. I turned, and what I saw was not human. I should have never turned around. I should have never looked, because when I did, I saw something that should not exist, something that should not be able to move, something that should not be grinning at me. And now, no matter how far I run, it is always one step behind. I turned, and there it was. At first, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. A figure standing just inches behind me on the staircase. Unmoving. No sound. No breath. Just there. It was tall, too tall, its head nearly grazing the unseen ceiling. Its arms hung at its sides, long and limp, fingers reaching almost to its knees. And its face, God, its face. It looked like a mask. Not a real face, but something that had been placed there, stretched and drawn. The features were smooth, as if painted on. A mouth curled into a permanent, awful grin, too wide, stretching from ear to ear. And the eyes were the worst part, because they weren't looking at me. They were looking through me, like it wasn't seeing me at all, but something inside me, something it wanted. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Every muscle in my body had locked up, frozen in terror. The figure didn't blink, didn't twitch. It just stood there, head slightly tilted, grinning, looking through me, waiting. I don't know how long I stood there. Seconds? Minutes? Then it took a step forward. A single, silent step. I flinched. That tiny movement, just the act of shifting my weight, was enough to break whatever trance I was in. I turned, and I ran. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I just ran. Up. Down. I didn't know anymore. The staircase twisted around me, the stone walls pressing close. Endless. Infinite. Unchanging. But I didn't stop, because I could hear it. Behind me. That step. That single, deliberate step. It wasn't running. It wasn't chasing me. It was just walking. Always one step behind. No matter how far I went. No matter how fast I moved. It was always there. And then the air changed. The darkness around me shifted. And suddenly, I wasn't alone. The whispers returned. Not from behind me. Not from ahead. From everywhere. The walls. The steps. The very air around me. Dozens of voices. Hundreds. Soft, overlapping murmurs, slipping over one another like tangled threads of sound. I couldn't understand them at first. Then, I made the mistake of listening. Don't stop moving. It will take your face. You've been here before. I clapped my hands over my ears. No, I haven't. But the voices grew louder, more distinct, and then one of them spoke in my voice. Keep going. I stopped. The words had come from right beside me. I turned my head, and something was standing there. My flashlight flickered. The glow barely illuminated the thing that stood just inches away. I saw myself, my own face, but wrong. The eyes were black pits. The mouth was stretched too wide, the teeth too white. It smiled at me, and then it opened its mouth, and my own voice came out. You've been here before. I stumbled backward. No, no, this wasn't real. I turned, forcing myself to move, and slammed into something solid. I looked up, and I saw it. Not the other me. Not the whispers. The thing that had been following me. The grinning thing. It loomed over me, closer than before, close enough to touch. And this time its head twitched, its grin widened, and it reached for me. I screamed. I scrambled back, kicking at the thing, my hands slipping on the cold stone. Its fingers barely missed me, but I felt them a brush of something too smooth, like the surface of a mask. I ran, blinded by panic, by instinct. I ran harder than I ever had before. And then I saw light. Not from my flashlight. Real light. An opening. I ran faster. The steps blurred beneath me, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The light grew brighter, closer, and just as I reached it, I tripped. My foot caught on the edge of a step. I tumbled forward, hitting the stone, my flashlight clattering away. The light, it was right there. I reached out. I was so close, and then the hand closed around my ankle and pulled. The moment its cold fingers wrapped around my ankle, a horrible sensation ran through me, like I had just been claimed. I kicked and screamed, clawing at the stone steps, but the thing dragged me backward, down, into the blackness. I felt my nails splinter against the stone. My flashlight had tumbled away, its beam flickering, casting twisted shadows on the walls. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel it, right behind me. That awful grin, those empty, staring eyes, and the voices, they were screaming now. Don't let it take you. Don't look at it. You won't come back. I dug my fingers into the cracks of the stone, struggling, but its grip tightened. And then something changed. The moment my body was yanked down past a certain step, I felt it. A shift in the air, a drop in temperature, and a sinking, gut-wrenching realization. I had crossed over. I was somewhere else. The staircase had changed. Or rather, I was no longer on the same staircase. The walls were wider. The air felt thicker. The cold was different. Not just chilling, but something else. Like the air itself was touching me, feeling me, knowing me. I scrambled to my feet. The thing was gone, but I knew it hadn't left. It was just watching. The staircase still spiraled. Up, down. It didn't matter anymore. Because now I wasn't alone. I saw them first in the corner of my eye. Figures, standing along the curve of the staircase. Motionless. Some pressed against the walls, others perched on the steps, hunched over, heads tilted at unnatural angles. And the worst part? They weren't watching me. They were listening. Their heads would jerk suddenly whenever I made a sound, a breath, a step, a whimper. Their heads twitched toward me like marionettes, bones cracking, faces frozen in expressions of pain. They had been here too long. They had been here forever. And now they had heard me. I tried to step quietly, tried to hold my breath, but I wasn't careful enough. My foot slipped on a loose piece of stone. The tiny scrape echoed through the stairwell like a gunshot. And they all turned, every single one of them, at the same time, with a sound like snapping bone. Their heads jerked toward me, their eyes too wide, too empty. And then, one of them stepped forward. It moved wrong, like a puppet being dragged by invisible strings. Its mouth opened, and a sound came out. Not a voice, not a whisper, a guttural, echoing moan, like something trying to remember how to speak. And as it took another shaking step toward me, the others moved too. Not running, not chasing, just stepping forward, one after another. Slow. I turned and I ran. I ran downward. I don't know why, but something deep inside me, something instinctual, screamed that if I ran up, I would be trapped. So I went down. The figures didn't run after me. They just moved. Their steps echoed in my ears. Soft, deliberate. And then, ahead, I saw a doorway. A break in the spiral. A way out. I sprinted toward it, heart hammering, lungs burning, and then I heard another voice. Help me. It came from the darkness beyond the doorway. A small voice. A child's voice. I stopped, because I knew that voice. I had heard it before, in dreams, in memories I didn't know I had. The voice of a little girl. Please don't leave me here. And then I saw her. She stood just beyond the doorway. A little girl, no older than 6, barefoot, dressed in an old, tattered nightgown. Her dark hair hung over her face. She was trembling, holding something in her hands. A pocket watch. It was ticking, slowly. I felt my heart stop, because I knew that watch. I had seen it before. I had owned it. She lifted her head, and I saw her face. My blood went ice cold, because she had my eyes, my own eyes. She was me, a younger version of me, and she was crying. Don't let it take me. Behind her, something moved, a shape, a shadow, not the figures from the staircase. Something bigger, something that had been waiting for me to come this far, something that had been watching. I knew if I stepped through that doorway, I would never leave. But if I left her behind, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Because she wasn't just a trick. She was real. She was me. And the watch in her hands, it was still ticking, counting down to something I didn't understand. Her small voice trembled. Please. It's coming. The shadow behind her stretched forward. A hand reached out, fingers closing in. I had seconds. I had to choose. The room was unbearably silent, save for the unnatural ticking of the watch. 11 hours, 42 minutes, and 57 seconds. His breath came in ragged gasps as he gripped the cursed object, his fingers white from the pressure. The time was counting down. 3 seconds left. The air had changed, thick, heavy, as if reality itself were suffocating him. 11 hours, 42 minutes, and 58 seconds. The shadows in the corners of the room twitched. They weren't just shadows anymore. They had depth. They had form. A shape peeled itself away from the darkness, its movements slow and deliberate. It had no face, but he knew it was looking at him, watching, waiting. 11 hours, 42 minutes, and 59 seconds. His legs trembled, but he couldn't move. Every part of him screamed to run, to fight, to do anything, but he was frozen. Something cold slithered across his skin, an unseen presence whispering in a language older than time itself. The watch's hands burned like ice, searing into his flesh. 11 hours and 43 minutes. The ticking stopped. The figure lunged. The world collapsed around him. A scream built in his throat, but it never came out. The walls bent inward, warping into an endless spiral of clocks, all ticking backward in an ear-splitting cacophony. He was falling, no, being pulled into the void where time had no meaning. Then silence. The room was empty. The chair where he sat was still there, but no one occupied it. The pocket watch lay on the floor, pristine, waiting for its next owner. And somewhere, in the distant echo of time, the ticking began again.